unraveling the minds of some of the world's most famous serial killers. Hi, welcome to Killer Instinct. I'm your host, Avery Smith. In this show, I will look up 4 different serial killers and determine what event in their life had the biggest impact on why they killed people. Today's episode will highlight Ted Bundy, so we're going to be taking a look at his childhood, his past relationships, and events that have happened to him to determine which one was the most impactful on his choices. I will be making my final selection based off the quotes, data, and statistics that I find during this episode. Let's dive into the general background of Ted Bundy. I first just want to give a disclaimer. There's going to be some talk about sexual assault and murder in this episode, so if that's something that can trigger you, then I would advise you not to watch the rest of the episode. Ted Bundy's full name is Theodore Robert Bundy, and he was born on November 24th, 1946 in Burlington, Vermont. Ted's mother was Eleanor Louise Caldwell, and she was unmarried, which led to the fact that Ted actually never knew his biological father, but his mother remarried and Ted did end up taking his last name, but it is said that Ted did resent his stepfather. This next piece of information I personally found really interesting, and it was published on biography.com, and it states that Bundy started life as his mother's secret shame, as his illegitimate birth humiliated her deeply religious parents, and then it also states in that website that to hide the fact that he was an illegitimate child, Bundy was raised as the adopted son of his grandparents, and he was told that his mother was actually his sister. That was just super interesting for me to find out because that would obviously be a huge adjustment when you find out that your sister is actually your mother. Another piece of research that I found on the same website on biography.com states that Bundy showed an unusual interest in the macabre at an early age. And I had to look this up. I didn't know what macabre meant, but it means disturbing and horrifying because of the involvement with death and serious injury. From the research that I did, I found a lot of things saying that Ted was just known for suspicious activity when he was a child and a teenager. One specifically was stated by an Iowa State criminologist named Matt DeLisi, and it says, Bundy was known to pick apart mice in the woods and try to drown people while swimming or boating. He showed no sense of remorse, guilt, embarrassment, or shame. It also states on the same website that as a teenager, a darker side of his character started to emerge, and Bundy liked to peer into other people's windows. So what I'm gathering is that he's kind of always been a creep. Bundy attended the University of Washington, where he graduated with a degree in psychology, and he was also accepted into and attended the law school in Utah, but he never actually graduated from there or received a degree. I really want to highlight Bundy's mental health state. In an article that was published on onlinescientificresearch.com, it states that Bundy had a number of mental health examinations done on him, and it was found that mental health issues were a genetic predisposition for him. Another quote says that psychiatrist Dorothy Ochsnow Lewis initially diagnosed Bundy with bipolar disorder and later with multiple personalities disorder, but he also displayed many traits of being a sociopath or a psychopath, such as charm and charisma with little genuine personality, the capacity to determine the difference between right and wrong with little effect on behavior, and obviously, as we learned, a lack of guilt and remorse. So as we've learned so far, Ted was kind of always in a rough mental state, but I think it's the next thing that we're going to talk about that really threw Ted in a loop. While Ted was attending the University of Washington, it is said that he fell in love with a young student, and her name was Diane Edwards. Now later on, Diane ended up breaking Ted's heart, and he was devastated. Now the key part of this story is that all of Ted's victims resembled Diane. They had long dark hair, they were tall, and they were very attractive in Ted's eyes. Now that you know a little bit about Ted's target audience, let's dive into the actual killings themselves. Young, attractive female students from the University of Washington began to disappear, and this was like the first killings that Ted Bundy was known for, but nobody really knows when he started killing. Ted ended up moving to Salt Lake City to kind of distract the cops so that nobody would think it was him, and he continued to kill in Utah, Idaho, and Colorado without being found. In August of 1975, Ted was arrested for the first time after the police pulled him over and found suspicious items in the back of his Volkswagen. This includes ski masks, handcuffs, ropes, etc., and investigators later linked those items to the killings of the missing women from Washington State. Now I'm going to go into how he executed the crimes. So like I said earlier in the trigger warning, if this is a time where you feel that you don't want to continue to watch, that is totally fine. Just a warning, there's going to be some gruesome content that I'm going to be talking about. So if you don't like to watch that or see that, then I would advise you to stop watching now. Ted said that he had a strong alcohol issue, and he claimed that he was either half drunk or more than when most of his killings took place. Ted would strangle his victims to death and often mutilate them after death. Bundy also displayed his victims' heads in his apartment, and he would sleep with the corpse's body until the smell became too unbearable. He also claimed that he would keep the bodies for future sexual gratification, and he would also do weird things with their heads, like shampoo their hair or do their makeup. Ted Bundy also claimed to have a hardcore porn addiction, and he claimed that his sexual fantasies were sparked by sexual violence printed videos. Okay, enough of the gruesome talk. We don't need to talk anymore about Ted Bundy's killings or anything like that. We're going to dive into the selection now and what I think was the most impactful on Bundy's life. Okay, reason number one, I do think that to some extent Ted was born with this. I think that his psychological exam, for the most part, really shows that he had the brain to commit these crimes. Like I said earlier, he was diagnosed with bipolar disorder, multiple personality disorder, he was a psychopath and a sociopath, and just the suspicious activity that he would partake in when he was just a young child, like the killing of the mice in the woods and trying to drown the kids in the pool without feeling any guilt or remorse. I do think that, to an extent, he was born with the brain to do this. Now, on the other hand, I do think that there was a key turning point, and I do believe that it was the breakup with his girlfriend, Diane, just because of everything that I read about how devastated and heartbroken he was, and the fact that all his victims resembled her. They were her age, they were attractive like she was to him, they had the same hair color, the same hair length, and all the things that resembled her. I do think that their breakup was the key turning point that kind of snapped Ted and made him really go on with all of the killings. I think that Ted ultimately wanted revenge without actually hurting Diane, so he just targeted people who looked like her. So to conclude my selection, I do believe that it was partially because he was born this way, and I also believe that the breakup with Diane was the key turning point to his life choices. Thank you so much for watching this Ted Bundy episode of Killer Instinct. Please make sure to like this video and subscribe to the JHS Creative Communications YouTube channel. Also, take time to subscribe to the Creative Communications podcast on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Please comment down below if you agree with me or if you think that I am wrong. Please tell me your thoughts. Thanks again for watching. Until next time, I'm Avery Smith, and this has been Killer Instinct.